So we have a crazy story from Toronto, Canada again. Young Lava, who is a rap artist from that part of the world, famous for songs such as Lurking, Stop Lying, and Conversations, has been convicted in a Canadian court. Now, this story is particularly interesting because it just shows how youths in the Toronto music scene constantly throw their life away, given the fact that Young Lava is no different from several other artists in Toronto, such as Top 5, who ultimately have been on trial for very serious crimes. So Young Lava, based on an article in the Toronto Star, on Wednesday evening had juries convict him, and his full name is Dayne Sitladeen, of manslaughter, even though he was charged with first-degree murder in the death of Blaine Grinsley. Grinsley was found shot in the chest in May 2019 at a townhouse unit of Etobicoke housing complex. He was wanted on a Canada-wide warrant, and you would think that anybody who was sought for murder would simply be in a basement somewhere or be trying to keep a low profile. However, Young Lava instead fled to the United States, where he was later arrested in Minnesota with 67 handguns in a car, and he pleaded guilty. Now, the question is, what exactly happened to the charges in his current case where he was charged with murder? Essentially, the jury in that case in Canada probably decided that there was not enough proof that Sitladeen or Young Lava had actually intended to kill and done so in a premeditated fashion, but instead had done so with provocation. But I'm going to read you a brief portion of the Toronto Star article to shed some light on as to why he may have not been convicted of the murder charge. So the article starts: while Sitladeen was present, he did not shoot Grinsley, nor did he have a gun, defense lawyer Monty McGregor said during this closing address earlier this week. He referred to surveillance video showing his client dressed in a distinctive champion tracksuit that he was also wearing when he was arrested 6 weeks earlier, carrying a pipe or crowbar. Grinsley had no other injuries other than a fatal gunshot wound, he noted. If Sitladeen was guilty of anything, it could only be manslaughter. So the defense lawyer is trying to say that there was no involvement because his client, Young Lava, was not holding anything at the time that he engaged in the incident, which ultimately led to the death of the individual there. Now, section 232 of the Canadian Criminal Code explains how a murder charge which Young Lava was faced with could be reduced to manslaughter. It states that culpable homicide that otherwise would be murder may be reduced to manslaughter if the person who committed it did so in the heat of passion caused by sudden provocation. And it goes on to say, what is provocation? Conduct of the victim that will constitute an indictable offense under this act that is punishable by 5 or more years of imprisonment, and that is such a nature to be sufficient to deprive an ordinary person of the power of self-control is provocation for purposes of this section. If the accused acted on it on the sudden and before there was time for passion to cool. What does this mean in plain English? It means that they're basically saying Sitladeen was faced with an individual who did something which was actually a crime under or a specified crime for which there was 5 or more years in imprisonment, and that action by the person who died was sufficient to anger or cause sitladeen to act in a way which ultimately led to the victim's death, and that's why his charge of murder was reduced to manslaughter under the Canadian Criminal Code. It should also be noted that under that particular section, murder is essentially a lesser included offense of the overall, or manslaughter is a lesser included offense of the murder charge. However, manslaughter can be charged by itself under section 234 of the Canadian Criminal Code, and the penalty for it, if a gun was used in the commission of a crime, would be a minimum of 4 years in prison, otherwise up to life in prison. So it's a crazy story, quite interesting but sad at the same time. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.